Right as we started to record this, I looked at my text messages. The top guy in franchising was a senior executive at McDonald's who brought us Jack in Box, Massage Envy, and Serve Pro. Just wrote to me and said, I've got a great franchise that's exploding. They need a board member. Are you interested? I've also started dozens of multi-million-dollar companies. I've taken several companies public. I've seen a lot of things over my 41-year career.
Kalo, I want you to be wildly successful, learn from these mistakes. You've been broke before. You've been to prison. What I would love is some of the stories behind the things that make Aaron.
Aaron Young is the CEO of Laughlin Associates and has helped over 200,000 entrepreneurs start, grow, and profit from their business.
He's also the author of Unshackled, a book that outlines the formula Aaron and his co-author, Robert Indries, used to build businesses that have generated over $1 billion in revenue.
I didn't want to write this book. There's a co-author's name on this book, and he wasn't a ghostwriter. He was one of my students. And we took his company from $1.5 million to almost $50 million in 4 years by implementing what's in this book. Not only can you make great relationships, but you can also make a lot of money.
Aaron Young, welcome to Tennessee. Welcome to our studio. It's an honor to have you in town.
Yeah, it's great to be here, and what a great place. And I love the Nashville area. So any chance to, we could have done this on Zoom, but this is way more fun to be here with you.
And again, I don't know how open you want to be on this podcast about your story.
You can ask me anything you
want.
But
there was probably 15 times last night and this morning when we were talking about me, and you saw it probably on my face every time, I'm just like, you've lived so many lives. You have so many experiences. You've experienced some super, super highs. You've experienced some pretty crazy lows.
Pretty significant
if you
challenges,
zoom
yeah.
out from a standpoint of like what people would call lows.
Sure.
You have a book that at the time of this recording, every single person will be able to go get and support. And I would also love to dive in again to some of the principles
Sure.
of what it looks like to be unshackled. But how would you set the stage if we were on a long elevator ride and someone just asked you the general question, Aaron, what do you do? What do you do?
I guess if it was a long elevator ride, at this stage of my life, at 60 years old, what I really do is I look for how can we build value in any relationship, any business engagement, as well as personal. Also, at 60, I'm way more interested in working with people that I enjoy than just trying to make a good financial deal with somebody. So I would say that I am able to help in my own businesses and in others that I advise or that I do business with, a path to getting to the goal that we have. And I guess my skill is being able to not get lost in all the extraneous stuff, not get lost in the weeds, and able to keep my eye on the outcome that we're seeking to achieve. And I'm really good at being, if you go back to like a wagon train, back from the old Westerns, the scout was always out in front or up higher than the wagon train. So here's all the energy down here, but the scout's going, oh, the bridge is out, or there's a problem over here, or this other way will actually seem longer, but it's going to actually be better. And I think that's sort of the role I fill for a lot of individuals.
Yeah, I explain at breakfast, I see you as a super connector and someone that's very strategic when it comes to business, and that's rare. A lot of times you have people that are business whiz that hate people or don't want to talk to people or very introverted and just don't talk to me. Or you have super connectors, which are always fun to be around, but they're not necessarily thinking 4D chess. They're thinking hey, how can I connect Aaron with somebody else? And when you can have someone that has both, I think there's a big responsibility that comes with that, but I think that's very special. And for someone who, admires people like you, I just love talking because I love talking to people like you because I'm like, what can I learn? How can I take, someone that has 30 plus years on me when it comes to experience and wisdom, and how can I learn from that?
So the leverage on that real
Yes.
fast is when you are, and I think you saw me maybe for the first time really, because the first time we were together was
at my event.
At your event. You're very busy.
Yep.
Last night we were at somebody else's event at a private event, and it was pretty small, maybe 50, 60 people. And I think I got to many of the most important people in the room.
Yep.
And I didn't have
Very casually.
And I was the interloper, But if you ask them what they're looking for, what's your ideal, or what's your avatar, what are you trying to reach, they want to talk about that.
Yeah.
And then if I can go, I wonder if I can make this connection with them, then it creates a level of friendship, or maybe not friendship, but you start to build trust.
Yeah.
And there also becomes, if you do a good job connecting, you get some emotional indebtedness from that person. They're like, that guy helped me out. So now, he's calling, I better take his call.
Yep.
And as long as you never waste that, and you're always trying to do the right thing for the other person, they'll want to introduce you. Right as we started to record this, I looked at my text messages. The top guy in franchising worldwide, the guy who was a senior executive at McDonald's, who brought us Jack in Box and Massage Envy and Serve Pro and hundreds and hundreds of big, well-known franchises, just wrote to me and said, I've got a great franchise that's exploding. They need a board member. Are you interested?
Wow.
Now, I don't know anything about that industry, but he's like, Aaron knows people.
Yeah.
Aaron will help raise money. Aaron will help them solve problems.
Yeah.
Because he and I sit on another board together. Yeah. And I've never asked him for anything, but I've introduced him to people. So then when he's got an introduction, he wants to come back. Yeah. And the cool thing is if you are not just a super connector, which it's very flattering. I don't think I would have identified myself as super, but I do love people.
Yeah.
I've also started dozens of multi-million-dollar companies. I've taken several companies public. I've seen a lot of things over my career, 41-year career. And if you can connect with people and see how you can take different disparate business pieces and connect them, then you can make, not only can you make great relationships, but you can also make a lot of money.
Yep.
You can become very financially successful and never have your hand out.
Yeah.
Never be like the one that's always just trying to take from somebody.
Yep.
I don't know how I became me. I just have noticed over my whole career I've had that wonderful experience.
Well, we're gonna dive into a little bit of your story, and what I find is it's one thing for people like you to say, "Hey, here's the top 3 things that you should do," and blah blah blah. A lot of people out there that will give advice. Great. I think there's a lot to be learned about the backstory and the stories behind the advice. So, you've been broke before.
Uh-huh.
You've been to prison.
Uh-huh.
You've taken companies public.
Uh-huh.
You've made millions of dollars on transactions.
Yes.
There's a lot in between there. You have a love for your
I've
family.
been married forever.
I saw you tear up with someone singing about their family. And so, what I would love is some of the stories behind the things that make Aaron, and some of the principles that you will not budge on, or these are the life lessons that if we are sitting across the coffee and you're like, Caleb, I want you to be wildly successful, learn from these mistakes. Here's the stories behind what I'm about to share with you. I'm going to hand it over to you to navigate this. Obviously, we'd be here all day, but I think I would love to highlight when you were broke, when you made hard decisions. You even mentioned to me, you said earlier at breakfast, which really stuck with me. You're like, hey, I did this and it was an ego play, pure ego play. There's maturity in since that decision. So I'm going to sit back.
All right, so you want me to just tell you some stories?
Stories, but lessons that were rooted in making you who you are. And then obviously I want to get into your book. I would love every single person that watches this, listens to this, to get the book selfishly for them. At the end of the day, you don't need support. Selfishly for them, if this book could help them, they should get it.
I'm so excited about this book, and we'll come back to it, but I'll just to that point that you just made. I didn't want to write this book.
Okay.
There's a co-author's name on this book, and he wasn't a ghostwriter, he was co-author.
Yep.
He was one of my students.
Yep.
And we took his company from $1.5 million to almost $50 million in 4 years by implementing what's in this book.
Wow.
And he lives in Romania.
Yeah.
And he said an engineer in Romania makes $500 a month. They can't afford your training, but they need to get the training, and they could afford a $25 book. So this book was written for the people that that are trying to figure out how to start and do it in at least the way I do it. It's not the way to do it, but it's my way to do it, where you have the greatest likelihood of succeeding. So that 41 years, or maybe it was 39 years, because the book's been in process for a couple of years. It's only come out in July of 24. that collective experience and all the things I learned and what I applied and how they worked are there. We can talk more about it later. But for everybody that's listening to this, this is a $25 or $22 something way of getting everything that's in a $7,500 training course.
Wow.
Or if they were going to pay me $25,000 a day to sit and talk to them.
Yeah.
But it's at a fraction of the price, and it's all there. Nothing's held back. The entire course is in the book.
Wow.
So it's a very easy way for people to get a start using a formula that has worked dozens of times, public and private, and for hundreds more big companies. So, okay, enough about the book. Where did it start? When I was a little boy, I was diagnosed with a degenerative bone disease. I was about 2 years old. And they told my parents, he's never going to be able to, he'll be in braces for a while. Eventually his hip bones will completely deteriorate. At that time, they weren't doing hip replacements like we do now.
Yep.
And they said he'll be in a wheelchair his whole life. And the doctor said to my mother, and I was just little, I don't remember this stuff. I have vague memories of the leg braces, but I was a little kid. But the doctor told my mom, he's going to have a hard time moving around with these braces on his legs and a metal bar between my shoes to hold my bones in just the right way to try to increase blood flow. He said, he may end up in a wheelchair, but only you will make him a cripple.
Wow. Wow.
And my mom said, what do you mean? She said, and the doctor said, he's going to be on the ground and won't be able to stand up. He's going to want to, you're going to need him to do something and he'll have a hard time moving. You have to let him sort it out. If you go pick him up or rescue him every time, you'll make him a cripple. And my mom has told stories about me can you imagine a little 3-year-old calling for their parent and them just saying, no, hurry up. You're going to be in trouble if you don't get in here. Come on, we're late, let's go. What I learned as a little child was if I've got a difficult circumstance, I have to figure it out because nobody's going to rescue me. I've got to solve this problem. Thankfully, I got through that period of time. Things happened, which we don't need to go into, but where medically I got the help I needed, and I'm not in a wheelchair 60 years later. Wow. But I learned that as a little child, and I can't tell you that I consciously remember it, but I know for a fact, as I heard the stories back from my parents, that this was one of the hardest things they ever had to do. I was their oldest.
Yeah.
So they had no experience with anybody else, but they learned, I've got to let him do it. And I learned I have to figure it out. It doesn't mean I have to figure it out alone. We had mom and dad, we had doctors, we had braces. There are things, and folks don't have to go it alone. But if you want to be a leader and if you want to be an entrepreneur, and if you want to have success in any sort of career, there is an element of, I need to figure this out because there is no white knight coming in to rescue me. I need to figure out, how am I going to do this and how am I going to make it work? And so for us as entrepreneurs, one of the greatest stories or lessons I ever learned was not only do I need to figure it out, but I'm capable of figuring it out.
Wow.
And that, when you realize you can do it, almost everything else becomes easy.
What is your initial knee-jerk reaction when people play the victim card? Because lots of people in business, lots of people in life play the victim card. And for people like you in your situation, it would be easy to justify hey, I was born this way. But that would have robbed you of so many things in your life.
I was born into a very modest home. My dad worked 2 jobs. My mom did daycare in our home. So we had all these little kids running around. I was changing diapers when I was, 10, 11 years old. If I was going to have nicer tennis shoes or jeans, so I was going into middle school or high school, I had to figure out how to do that myself. And mom, dad took great care of us, but it was limited.
Yep.
And so people, if they say you were born this way, now, first of all, I'll say this: I wasn't born, mutated in some way where people are going to be naturally, repelled or something.
But you had to work harder than the average person maybe in a season of
No,
your life.
I mean, nobody gave me anything.
Yeah.
But except for my parents did give me probably the most important thing that I think any parent can give their kids, which is they loved me, but they also believed in me. They also were always encouraging. They always said, you can do anything.
Yep.
Anything you put your mind to, you can do it.
Yep.
And I loved them and trusted them enough that I believed them.
Wow.
And there are a lot of people who don't have that, who don't have anybody cheerleading. So I did have an advantage. I had mom and dad that stayed together. I had a religious construct that was very helpful for me as a young man. I was the oldest, which a lot of leaders are the oldest, in their family.
Yeah, I'm the oldest.
Yeah, a lot of people that ended up running things were the first child.
Yeah.
And so were there things? Sure. Was I born white in a country that is dominated by a white class of people? Yeah. I mean, was I born a man? Yeah. That is an advantage, especially starting from 1964. That was an advantage. Remember, women couldn't even get a credit card without their husband co-signing, no matter how much money they made until the 80s. They couldn't get a credit card. I mean, so was it to be a white man in America with parents who loved me? And that's like winning the lottery.
Right.
And if I've offended any of your viewers, I'm sorry, but you're stupid if you don't understand this. That's lucky. Now, there's a lot of changes societally that are making it easier for other people who are not the dominant culture to succeed. And we have a very diverse employee base. We have an incredibly diverse client base, tens of thousands of business owner clients that are they're from every walk of life. Because who cares?
Right.
All we want is for people to be successful.
Right.
We want people to be able to reach their dreams. We want people to do that. But did I have it
I guess
financially easy? No. Did I have an education easy? No.
Yeah.
But did I have some things in my favor? Yes. Everybody has something in their favor. And the goal is to identify what is it and leverage that thing.
Okay.
Because would I have been a great NBA basketball player? No. 5'8", I'm built stocky, I got a big butt and legs. I was never going to jump high.
Yeah.
But somebody was I ever going to be an Olympic swimmer? Look at Michael Phelps and all the weird stuff about him physically that makes him a great swimmer. Everybody has something.
So if I had to summarize what you're saying is find that thing that you're good at or that you love and then leverage that. Use the word leverage because everyone, no matter how you're born, there is some type of genius that you have in your life.
You've got some superpower.
Find that and leverage it.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, for anybody that's young that's listening, I'm not against college, even though I didn't get a college education. I'm in favor of college if there's a reason to get that education. There's a great quote that says, education will make you a living, self-education will make you a fortune.
Yeah.
And I believe that.
Yeah.
The biggest thing people do is they go follow all these classes so they can get a certificate so they can try to go get a specific job.
Yeah.
And that may or may not work. Whereas if people say, what am I really good at in my personality?
Yeah.
And you develop that, you can apply it in any industry.
That's good.
You can be successful anywhere, but find your thing.
Yeah.
Find your superpower.
So
I tell long stories.
The first time you were broke, 1991?
Well, we had a big setback in 91. We had a bankruptcy.
Okay.
So I had my first I started my first company, built it up, sold it, started my second company, built it up to 5 stores. It was in 1986 in the cellular phone business. It was
I love it.
when phones were $3,000 for the phone, 49 cents a minute to use the phone.
Wow.
Yeah, and it only worked in a little tiny geographic area.
Yeah.
Couldn't go everywhere.
It's like walkie-talkies.
I think walkie-talkies had longer range. But it was cool, you had this giant thing mounted under your seat in your car and a curly cord that hooked to a handset. It wasn't anything like we think of now. But that was back in 86. We built that up to multiple stores. We're very successful. And then in one meeting, the carrier, GTE, just pulled the rug out from under us on everything. Well, I was in my 20s and I'd only had successes. a bunch of these other people were older than me, and they'd been around for a while. Most of them closed up. They sold out of their inventory, closed up their shop, let their people go. Very smart. Me, I was naive. I'd never been down that road before. So I thought, well, I'm one of the biggest agents, and I've got great people, and everybody loves us. And, anyway, after I used up all of our cash and all of our business credit and all of my cash and leveraged our home and did everything and ended up hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars upside down, and my wife pregnant with our second child, 9 months pregnant, sitting in a bankruptcy court, I learned a very valuable lesson, which is don't think you're stronger than the marketplace. The market will dictate things. At the time of this recording, we're less than 2 months from a presidential election. The biggest thing business owners should be thinking about right now is, regardless of who wins, how will I need to adjust what I'm doing to go along with what the real life circumstances are. Everybody gripes and complains and pickets and kicks dirt. And I'm like, well, that's going to get you nowhere.
Right.
But what will get you somewhere is to go, what are the facts? What is happening?
Yep.
And you have to be pretty zen about that. You have to be dispassionate.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody says, well, business is all about passion. I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
I think business is all about being smart and being opportunistic.
Yep.
What's happening right now, and how can I provide some value to the market where people will buy something from me because of the circumstances.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what we did then. And what happened then was I went from being on the radio, in the newspaper, kind of a quasi big deal in my little city of Portland, Oregon, to being without all that. And I was broke.
Mm-hmm.
But another guy who was CEO of a big company said, oh, that guy has done some cool things that we need at our much, much bigger company. And he took me out to lunch and he offered me a job. And next thing I know, at 29, I'm the vice president of sales for a publicly traded multinational with offices, 350 offices around the world. They gave me the keys to a really nice car, basically, and let me drive. And I fixed their sales, and I didn't know the other thing I want to say really clearly to anybody listening is I just didn't know any better. I figured I was old enough. 29 now, I go, would I have really given a 29-year-old in a public company setting that role?
Yeah.
But that was as old as I'd ever been.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought I could do it, right? Yeah. And I did do it.
And you did do it.
I did do it, but the point is, sometimes it's good to just go, somebody's going to do this. Why not me?
Right. I want to go back to when you failed at that business.
Oh, sure.
The lesson that you learned from that was, hey, you were on the Titanic and you were trying to be super efficient and trying to outsmart, but at the end of the day, the business that you were in was sinking due to the market. And what you mean by that is supply and demand. There was not demand for the business that you were getting into.
I would say it slightly, I'd characterize it differently, because has cellular phone business grown or shrunken?
I would say
then?
It's grown.
Yeah. So no, it was growing, but it was the decision by the powers that be had decided to grow it through big box retailers, not through independent agencies. And so they basically removed everything that made it possible for us to operate.
Yep.
How we got paid, how we got co-op advertising, and so on. That all shifted to what a big retailer who's going to use cell phones as a loss leader instead of trying to make money on it. What I didn't understand was where the market was going.
Yeah.
And I fought against it. So what I learned was there's plenty of demand, just not demand for the way I was doing it. And so it was a really tremendous lesson in retrospect.
Yep.
It was a painful lesson,
Yeah.
but it taught me something that I've never done it again. When I've seen the market shifting, I adjust to the market instead of trying to swim against the current.
Yeah. My question is how. It's easy to say you adjust the market, but how now do you become aware? How do you put your own biases aside? What questions are you asking? What are you looking at when you're like, how do I know what the market is thinking?
Well, you just used a great word, which was bias. Most people that I meet are consuming information that supports their belief system.
Yep.
They don't want to hear somebody making a logical argument for something they don't like.
Right.
Right.
And
that's
we're in political season now, and that's a prime example.
Yeah.
Every day.
So
Yep.
if you decide to watch MSNBC or Fox,
Yep.
You're doing that typically because you have a confirmation bias toward one opinion or the other,
Yep.
and they will just feed you what
Yep.
you want. So I decided many years ago to consume both. So if you were to go to look at my radio in my car, you'll see Fox, you'll see MSNBC, you'll see the BBC, and you'll see Bloomberg.
Mm.
And even though Michael Bloomberg is a Democrat,
Yep.
but they are reporting on finance.
Yep.
And the numbers move somewhat politically, but mostly they're driven by opportunity.
Right.
So if I'm listening to what are people saying,
Yep.
including people in other countries,
Mm-hmm.
about what we're going through, and I'm looking at the numbers, I've been around long enough, I can sort of get a sense of, I think we should be leaning this way or we should be positioning our message this way. How do you do it? You have to decide to be more dedicated to helping your customer than proving your opinions right.
Yeah.
That's how I would say you do it. That's how you adjust. What is the customer going to be looking for? What are they afraid of? What are they excited about? How do we bring whatever our service or product is to them in the way that at this moment they're thinking?
Yeah.
And that is really what it is. And if you're providing a good, valuable product or service and you can explain it based on what's happening today, people will buy from you, right? If you try to convince somebody that has a different philosophical stand than you do, you're going to just beat your head against a wall. They're not going to switch over to your philosophical beliefs, but they will buy your product or use your service. And if you can keep it apolitical, don't be political. I tell people all the time, if you want to be political, go vote, go knock doors, go give money to candidates that you believe in. But at work, keep politics out, because you don't want to be, unless you're dedicated to just working with one mindset, which I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody that wants to get big wants to do great things for as many people as you can, help as many people as you can. And the way you do that is by providing something really valuable and not putting a bunch of weird strings on it that make people uncomfortable. So if I could summarize all that, I'd say one part of the definition of being Zen, like a Zen garden or whatever, meditation, all that, is to look at things unemotionally.
Yeah.
Just
very stoic
here's
as well.
What's So stoicism is basically the same thing.
Yeah.
Being quiet and just noticing what is going on.
Yep.
And if you're unsure, check with a variety of people who have different perspectives than you and confirm what you think you're observing. Remember, what you're observing isn't just what's going on. What you're observing is what you interpret what's going on to be through the lens of your life experience. And so you and the person next to you may be seeing a completely different thing happening based on your history.
Yeah.
So sometimes you need to cross-check with people and go, am I seeing this? Like, are you seeing this?
Yep.
What you're seeing something different? Tell me what you're seeing, and being open to it. That's how you adjust the market, in my opinion.
So 1993, you're 29 years old. You take on, you're an executive
I get hired to this job,
a public company. What's the next lesson in your timeline that you want to bring up? So you're crushing it
there.
Yeah, just in general,
Okay, so if I go back to my first not real business, but it acted like a business, but it wasn't a business, was my painting business, it wasn't house painting, it was apartments, turning apartments in high school. I got hired. I negotiated with the owner of a bunch of buildings. I got hired by a manager of a building to turn apartments when I was 14. At 16, I got hired by the owner of that building and a bunch of other buildings to paint his house. And I got to know him. And I said, I'll do all your buildings for this price, which was 3 times what the manager was paying me. So then all of a sudden I've got a bunch of other teenagers painting apartments, right? Then I took that and built the cell phone or the recycling business, then the cell phone business, then went to the public company. So I went from me painting to a bunch of people in different buildings. How am I going to manage that? Then the recycling business, 2 trucks, 4 guys, 5,000 homes. How do we manage that? 5,000 customers. Then it was the cell phone business, ended up with 5 locations. How do I manage sales teams, accounting? How do I manage all that as a mid-20s guy in different locations? I'm not there to look over the shoulders. Then I go to the public company, 350 offices all over the freaking world. How do you do it? So, and part of what you'll see in this book is I talk a lot about SRA, same rules apply. Once you figure out a formula for keeping track of people, keeping score, like if you went to a ball game and you're watching a basketball game and there are people running up and down the field and there's great athleticism, but you have no idea how much time is in the game, how many points have been scored, how many timeouts are left, how many fouls have been committed. If you don't know any of that and they're just running around, at what point do you kind of get bored with that? Or you don't have any sense of how to define success or failure, right? When you learn how to create scoreboards based on really, really simple things inside of your business, and then you know where the outcome is, you know what the goal is you're trying to reach, and then you have a few things that you're measuring, and everybody in the team knows what the goals are, and then they get to decide how to move the ball, and you keep score on all that. You can do that across great landscape. You can do that across lots of people, lots of offices, because it's all the creative genius of the people coupled with very simple matrix that you're measuring, knowing that these 4 things that let's say we're measuring tell us if we're going the right direction or we're going the wrong direction. What's the lesson from the public company? The stuff that I learned before translated to a much higher level, much more professional, much more scrutinized industry with lots more people and lots of different cultures. It still worked. The same rules applied in all these places. Once you understand the math or the recipe, however you wanted, the formula around something, then if you can't unsee it, you can look at all over the place and go, oh, here's how we would fix that. Here's how we would grow that. Here's how we would solve that turnover problem. Here's how we'll increase marketing, sales, deliveries, so on and so forth. That was the great lesson, was that in a circumstance that I believed I was utterly unqualified for.
Yeah.
No college education, been scrappy entrepreneur, just went bankrupt.
Yeah.
Right? And now you're going to put me in a corner office and put me in charge of all this stuff and send me around the world? Okay, well, I only knew what I knew. I applied what I knew. It worked. And then all of a sudden, at that point, so by the time I was 31, 32, I knew, oh, I understand something that apparently a whole bunch of people that I thought were smarter, better educated, more competent than me, they don't understand it, which gave me a level of confidence to go out and do it over and over and over and over and over again, dozens and dozens of times, and then teach other companies from very famous names that you know, big public companies, to lots of companies you've never heard of, but that are still doing tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. You know, the same rules apply across everything. I'm helping right now. I've got a genetics laboratory. I've got a military contractor. I've got a red light therapy national franchise. I've got a robotics company that I just helped negotiate a deal with Reynolds Aluminum for several $100 million. I have all these people that I get to work with and advise, and the help goes across the board. But for me, it's the same thing over and over and over again.
Profound. That's profound.
It works. I've done Indian reservations and school districts and hospitals. Same rules apply.
I'm going to ask a question that might sound like a dumb question, but when you say same rules apply and you are getting into a random business, how do you get in? Like when you say same rules apply, and like I'm in the financial service business, but let's say someone's in the trucking business, how do you approach
We just enrolled a bunch of trucking companies in California.
Okay.
Hundreds of drivers.
Well, how do you approach the same rule apply?
The rules that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The best way I've been able to translate those to other people and I know I didn't expect the book to be sitting on this table when we came in here today, but the rules are right here. This is my formula. This is the formula in that book. And not only is this book the formula, it's the formula plus how one of my students, who was 29 years old when we started, took his company to almost $50 million from 1.5 in 4 years.
Yep.
So it's what I taught him and how he applied it. And so there are the rules. The rules are right there.
This is a very.
This is a workbook.
This is like a 300-page book right here. Is there any favorite rules out of this book that you would just like highlight, or is it
Nope.
just okay?
No. Well, okay. If you want to do, I'll give you this filter. If you have a horrible idea, it doesn't matter how good the formula is.
Got it.
If you have a really clever idea, but you're ahead of the market,
Yep.
it doesn't matter. If you think that you need to be the Lord and master and king over the thing that you're building, this won't help you.
Yeah.
This is going to tell you how to build a company that transcends beyond you.
Yep.
And some people love to be the bottleneck. They love everybody coming to their door and saying, "Hey, boss, do you have 5 minutes?" They love it. They get a lot of juice from that. I never liked it. I love people, but I don't want to do the same thing over and over every day. This book tells you how to build successful organizations. And this stuff is in action on the entrepreneurial level, but also on the big enterprise level for middle management people.
Yeah.
They're using the same rules apply.
I love
If you're running a department, I'm not going to drop any names, but I will tell you one of the biggest companies in the world, one whole huge division that takes care of 1.6 million employees is using this material. And so the rules are right. The formula's in the book.
Yeah.
That's why we did the book. I'm not trying to be cute or coy. I'm saying none of those is more important than the other.
Yeah.
And it's important to do them in order.
Yep.
So assume you have a good idea. If you were to buy this book and just go, there's step 0, which is basically, are you organized properly? But then 1 through 8, you do all of them. There are different growth periods and seasons of the company. Because this book is really from startup to either sell or step out of I don't say you have to step out, but step out of the way.
Yeah.
Step out of the way of your management team. Because if you build a great management team, they're going to do a better job than you at almost every single thing.
Yep.
What they may not do as well as you is see the big picture. And so if you want to be a chairman instead of a president, if you want to direct something but not work your tail off 1 million hours a week, then this is for you. And those are the rules that I learned through reading and going to events and talking to people smarter than me, talking to people richer than me, being humble enough to be teachable when I thought I knew. The bankruptcy was a great humbler.
Yeah.
All of a sudden I realized, I'm not that smart.
Yeah.
But then I talked to other people and I learned how you avoid it. And my way is not the way, it's just a way.
Yep.
But it's a way that just keeps on working.
Yeah.
So why not at least check it out?
Yeah.
Right?
Love it. So you went to prison.
I did.
Why don't you unpack the lessons and stories in that 14-month period of your life, but all what led up to it and then what you learned after it?
The worst thing I learned, so I was indicted not because of any actions of me or my companies, but because of somebody else that we were working with. And the indictment was conspiracy, which to me means we were plotting together to do some bad thing.
Yeah.
But the law says conspiracy, you can be charged with criminal conspiracy and never know about any crime. You just have to have materially assisted. So we formed a bunch of Nevada corporations for somebody's clients, over time. They would just say, we need a company named this, company named this, which we do with law firms all the time. They were all from law firms. 100% of the sales were from law firms. We did that. And then when their big client who owned an offshore bank, when that person came under scrutiny, they just walked back the chain to everybody that was involved, and like 40 people got indicted. And my partner and I got indicted on conspiracy. And the lawyer said, we know you don't know about the crime, but you still materially assisted by forming entities. And I thought, well, that's insane. There's nothing illegal about anything we've done. So we fought it and spent about $2 million fighting in legal fees. They never froze a bank account. They never took our passports. They never stopped our business. Yeah. To my knowledge, I didn't lose any customers. I didn't lose any of the legal or accounting firms we were working with. I didn't lose my team. My two leaders, my two main generals, both got called in and were threatened with either being a witness or a co-conspirator. What do you want to be? They'd only worked for us for about 1.5 years at that point. And that was in 2003. It's now 2024, and both of them still work for me.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. What I learned was there are things that are just outside of your control, that it doesn't matter logically as you evaluate it. It doesn't really matter that you go, this isn't right or this isn't fair or, whatever. In this case, it was a legal case. It could be somebody who gets hit by a drunk driver. It could be somebody who goes through a bad divorce. It could be somebody who gets robbed or attacked or has to go to war and see horrible things. And they come back and go, this isn't fair. Like I shouldn't have had to go through that. Somebody should pay for that. And maybe somebody should, I don't know, in different cases. In my case, I finally had to come to grips with we're on this conveyor belt and we can't get off. So what do I do to mitigate the risk? What do I do to get as mentally prepared for what's coming as I can? And then how do I make the experience itself as useful as possible, even though I do not want to be here? And to be really clear, and I just cannot overstate this loudly enough, it was much worse for my wife and for my kids than it was for me. What seemed so terrifying, I got there and I was like, oh, mostly I'm just going to be bored out of my mind. Yeah. But I'm not going to get hurt. Yeah. I maybe have judgmental things coming from the outside world, but even those fears, I thought my career was over.
I mean, you already went bankrupt, and I feel like that like I feel like a lot of people are afraid of what other people think of them, and what I admire about you is like I don't see that hanging over your head. Because it's like you're alive, you're thriving, and you've had things like so many people are afraid to actually take a move or take a stand because they're afraid. But like when you already experienced that, I'm just wondering like, how do you think?
15 years in between those two things.
Yep.
Where we had tremendous success,
right.
Employed tons of people, helped tens of thousands of individuals. I mean, we did all this good work so that when the government thing came, the judge just got flooded with letters, hundreds of letters.
Wow.
They were like, you got the wrong guy.
Yeah.
And even the judge at sentencing said to the DOJ and the IRS and said, this is a Monday morning, first case Monday morning, 9:00 Monday morning. And the Chief Justice for the federal court, who's also on the Ninth Appellate Court, so he makes case law. He's a big time judge. He said, I've spent the better part of the last 2 days, so the weekend, trying to reconcile what these two, my business partner, what these two men have been accused of versus everything else in their life.
Wow.
It's in the public record. He said that. I'm trying to reconcile what they've been accused of versus all this evidence of everything else. And then he chastened the government, and they wanted to bring some witnesses, and he said, you have the right to bring witnesses, but I've already made up my mind, so if you'd like to waste the court's time, call your witnesses. And they said, no, because they have to face him again this afternoon, right? They've got to keep going back in front of this guy. Nope. And then he said, are you done? Are you done pursuing these guys? Wow. They said, yes. He said, okay, then we're going to dramatically reduce this from what we'd agreed to what we actually did. And all of our actual work, all of our actual relationships, all of our relationship capital, all of our social capital was on display.
Yeah.
Versus the thing that somebody was saying, look what they were conspirators. If we just show up and do the best we can every day and do the best we can to take care of our stakeholders, so our family, our employees, our clients, our vendors, if we are honest and just keep showing up in integrity day after day, year after year, when you have a problem that you think is the end, like I thought, who will ever trust me again?
Yeah.
I deal with very, very personal things to people, their assets, their money. I deal with things that you want people to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is it. I'm done.
Yeah.
And you know what actually happened? Bigger companies who'd been through similar things and prevailed came back and said, you didn't lose your marriage. You didn't lose your partnership. You didn't lose your employees. You didn't lose your leadership. You didn't lose your clients. We want to work with you.
Yeah.
I could not have imagined that. But what it was all those years of trying to make sure I'm doing things properly and honestly and in integrity and accept when I did something wrong and acknowledge it and deal with it. All that came back to lift us up through that bad experience.
What did you learn while camping? That's what you
What
jokingly
did I learn?
That's what you jokingly
They call it prison camp.
And then when you got out, what were some of when you look back, you're like, hey, take this principle or lesson from me without having to live through it?
Probably the most important thing I learned while I was in the prison was, because most of the guys were there, probably 90% were there on drug charges. Lots of them were gang members who had been arrested on nonviolent crimes. Some of them had committed very violent or like maybe bank robbers or whatever, and they'd maybe had a 40-year sentence and they were now near the end, so they were in the low security, waiting for 5 years from now when they're going to get out. What I learned in meeting so many of these men, there were 500 people there, and what I learned was that, when we think about the ladder of life, that success ladder or the progression of life, I realized I was further up the ladder than basically everybody there, but I don't know that I'd made as much progress on the ladder as a lot of them. A lot of those people had come from horrible situations, the worst things I didn't even know could be true, and they'd done some criminal things, but they had done a lot of things to build families, build relationships. They wanted, almost to a man, wanted to get out away from the gangs. They were safe in here. They didn't have to be part of it. But out there, they were at risk and their family was at risk. They wanted to get out. And I thought, I have judged people harshly because they looked different to me. They looked rough. They were, think about people we'll see on the street, and sometimes you see scary people and you go, I think I'll cross the street, not go through there. I'll go over there. I couldn't walk away from it here. And I got to hear a lot of their stories and understand their journey. And that has made it much easier for me to look past a lot of things that I was, as a young man, I was much more superficial. And I think I see people, I'm able to look past things that at first don't look like what we're looking for and dig a little deeper. Sometimes I'm right. They're not what I'm looking for, but sometimes it was good to dig in and find more. That was a really valuable thing to learn there. There are many lessons from that time period, but probably the greatest one was don't get too cocky because you can get brought down pretty fast. Live a life where if you do get, your knees knocked out, that you, if you've done the right thing before, people tend to support you and stay with you, and don't judge a book by its cover. Tried and true, truths, but I learned them very viscerally there.
All right, so it's 2024 at the time of this recording. What since then? What other stories?
Since 06?
Since
07?
Yeah, any other stories, principles? Obviously, the book has the stories, has the lessons.
None of those stories are in the book. This is not a particularly personal. It's not a memoir.
Right.
It's a workbook. I will tell you. Since then, so it came out, and the day that my wife picked me up, 6 o'clock in the morning at the prison, the judge said, you can go right back to running your companies.
Wow.
And so because these principles had been in place during that year that I missed of work, I still took home $974,000, right? That was our take-home pay. So my wife said, hey, if there was a problem, I just threw money at it, right? And my wife, thankfully, is such a genius and such a powerhouse of a human.
Yeah.
We had a Harvard MBA, founder of WebMD, that offered to watch over the company, had the CFO of Intel offer to watch over the company. And my partner said, the only person I feel really, truly comfortable with is your wife.
Wow.
Who was a stay-at-home mom at the time. But the formula was in place. And she said, I don't know anything about how to do this. And I said, you don't need to know how to run the company. The team knows how to run the company.
Yep.
What they need is somebody that can hold them accountable on the big topics, on the big, I remember her telling me signing a $400,000 tax check or something like that. And that her hand was shaking as she was going to sign this big check. I said, have you talked to everybody? She goes, yeah. I said, good. Then you did the right thing. That was wonderful. That if you build a system, it'll work with whether or not you're there. That has been, I always knew it, but prison gave me the chance to really see it work.
Yeah.
Like really, where I couldn't have a meeting, an email, a phone call.
It wasn't like
nothing.
I'm going on vacation, but I'm turning on my phone.
Kind
of deal.
There was zero. I could do zero.
It's like the best sabbatical opportunity of your life.
And it was a great test of this formula that I believed in.
Yeah.
And it worked beautifully.
Wow.
And so beautifully that I didn't come back and get so involved in the companies as I was before. I stood back and I started buying other businesses, and we just started doing tons of new stuff because I could fully trust that the system was working. And now we've spread that so that my life now is to me at least, is endlessly fascinating.
It is.
And fun.
I can attest to that. I can attest to that. You have many stories, many lessons, many people that are in your life.
Great people.
It's very rich.
It's a very rich life.
Yeah.
And it's a very free life because I only do what I'm great at and that I want to do.
Yep.
And I believe most individuals can achieve that if you've got real things against you, you've got medical issues or psychological issues or just circumstances that have buried you. It's sometimes going to be difficult, if not impossible, to climb out. But for most people, and they don't need to be entrepreneurs. I mean, as a matter of fact, most people shouldn't be entrepreneurs. The people that should be entrepreneurs are people who see the world in a way where they see opportunity everywhere. Like they're seeing things that people around them are not seeing. That mind, that vision, that mindset is what makes a good entrepreneur. It also makes most really good entrepreneurs really bad managers because managers need to get things into a rhythm. And entrepreneurs are constantly seeing the next thing.
Yep.
So most people are not able to walk that path. So I don't say, if you really want to be successful, be an entrepreneur. I don't believe that. I think people can be wildly successful as an employee. I think they can be wildly successful as a government employee. Leverage the definiteness of your income and of your retirement to start investing in real estate or investing in whatever, to use a whole life in policy and start creating tools around you that you can use opportunistically, and you have the definiteness of this paycheck coming, and you know you're going to have good health benefits your whole life.
Right.
You know that's taken care of already. Entrepreneurs don't have that.
Yep.
Right? So use that as your home base, as your safe spot, or as your pivot point, right?
Yep.
And start using leverage to take advantage of those opportunities that exist and go do some. Now, I guess if you're investing in real estate or if you're doing things, it's not really entrepreneurial, but it is sort of a business.
Yep.
So
I don't know if you know this, but you just went back to your childhood.
Did I?
That same principle.
I didn't hear it. What did I say?
So you said, regardless of where you're at, take your resources, learn to leverage that.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
And it's actually very profound because, that's what I mean by the beauty of talking to someone like you is like, the same lessons always apply kind of
The
deal.
rules apply. Yeah.
And there's something very beautiful about, regardless of who's watching or listening to this, one of the things, you do not have to be an quote unquote entrepreneur doing it. Like, take your resources, take the inputs, your current relationships, the money that is coming in or not coming in, your skill sets that you have, and figure out where we can be more valuable, but then leverage that. And regardless of what situation that's in, like, that is the 1-2 punch to live a more intentional, free life, which is pretty special.
And a life that you'll love.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people say follow your bliss. I don't really believe in that. I believe in do something that gives you some control over your life.
Yeah, that's good.
And then when you have control, then you have flexibility
That's good.
to do things that you love. But to just follow your bliss, which is a really nice thing to say,
Yep.
but it's not always going to pay the bills.
Yep.
So do things that put you in a position to have affirmative control over your life.
Yep. Love that. Before we wrap up, what are you currently up to? I know you're involved with a lot of cool businesses. We don't have to go through them all, but is there any businesses that you're currently involved with that would be worth mentioning and having people check out?
Well, still at the mothership. So back in 2001, my partner and I bought a company called Laughlin Associates. It was already 29 years old, and they were the biggest Nevada incorporation service in the country. We bought them, immediately went to all 50 states instead of being just locked into Nevada. Again, I looked at it and I thought, there's all this value here, and if the Nevada Assembly changes the rules, we're out of business. So I don't want to be that dependent on an ever fluctuating governmental body.
Yep.
So we're going to go to all 50 states.
Yep.
Because then if Nevada changes, I've still got lots of places to go, right? So Laughlin, we've grown Laughlin. Laughlin went through the whole prison thing. We've recently added something called Laughlin Black. We've done a joint venture with a private equity / fractional family office company to bring another level of services. Basically, we've set things up for wealthy people, but then it was like, and here's your Maybach, have a great time. Here's your supercar, you know?
Yeah.
But we found that just because you give somebody a supercar doesn't mean they really are ready to drive it.
Right.
Or that they want to drive it. They might want to sit in the back of the Maybach and be on their phone while somebody else drives it.
Yeah.
So what we're doing now is we're helping our most well-heeled clients to manage their empires.
Yep.
And those are much bigger engagements. But as I've been told now over and over and over again, what we're charging is no different than what they would have to do to go hire a really competent employee who would not know any of the stuff that we're doing. So it's cheaper to pay us than try to bring a team along to run it for them. So that's a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying that. And I'm enjoying teaching the Unshackled class and so on. That is a lot of fun. And we have, we're adding under Laughlin Black, because we're dealing with everybody that becomes a Laughlin Black client is going to be more financially successful.
Yep.
So while we've used whole life policies as sort of in an ad hoc way, now through partnerships like with you guys, we're very excited to have a systematic way. But, part of that, I've always been hesitant because we do a really good job with our clients.
Right.
We have good systems.
Yep.
Our clients stay with us for a very long time.
Yep.
So when I would hand somebody off to someone else, and I kind of didn't have rights to hold that new vendor accountable, I never knew what I was going to get. And I knew if this doesn't go well,
it's going to
reflect back on us.
Yep.
And so we've become very intentional about basically the way I describe it is we've got everybody under the tent. So we have all these separate companies that have their own business, but we all have an agreed upon accountability to one another and a way of serving the client, make sure the client's needs are met before our individual corporate needs. And what's happening with that is that not only is the client beautifully taken care of, no matter where they started, as they progress and learn and grow, the next thing is available. And now their entities and their strategic tax planning and their insurance and their corporate strategy, and I could go on adding things. Their borrowing and credit lines, all these things that we now have under the tent that are still run by individual companies, but everybody's working cooperatively to make sure the customer gets taken care of, and that as appropriate, we make the next introduction and there's transparency and accountability where it's legal. I mean, if I give somebody to a lawyer, I can't know everything they tell the lawyer.
Right.
I'm not going to look at everybody's taxes. I don't have that right. But planning-wise, it's cohesive, which means the customer is beautifully taken care of, and all of the service providers are not having to constantly hunt for new clients because we're all lifting this group of clients. Now, we're talking about, a lot of people, tens and tens and tens, maybe over 100,000 people. So there's no end of work and opportunity. But the point is, it's done in a way that puts the client first. It gives us an ability to hire great employees and really train them, and they give them a lot of flexibility to use their superpowers so that they can solve problems and innovate. Because there's like what am I trying to say? There's I keep thinking continuity. That's not what I want. There's a predictability about the workload that's going to be coming through. So you can afford to pay good people and pay them well and have the great team. Whereas if you don't have that predictability of new clients and revenue, you kind of have to hedge, right? So by creating a cooperative model with great providers, we end up doing a better job for the client and a better job for our companies, and everybody prospers in that circumstance. And to me, that is like the ultimate deal. It's not about this is mine, I need to hold on to it. It's like, how do we take care of that person and build enterprise value?
That's good.
It's a much happier way to live for me.
Aaron, if this was your last day on earth and you couldn't give the book or any talks or any podcast recordings to the people that you love the most, which is your family, but you had one last conversation with them, besides telling them that you love them, what else would you say?
Get to know yourself as best as you can. If that means getting some therapy to see blind spots, if that means doing something that's maybe not the most financially valuable for a season of your life, to go learn more about who you are as a human. Because once you know who you are, the world opens up completely to you. Relationships are better. Your parenting will be better. Your friendships will be greater. You'll see the world as an abundant place, not a scarce place. When you understand who you are, how you fit, and what value you bring, when you can really understand who you are, your life is great. And if that's all I could teach my kids and our grandkids, is spend less time trying to meet somebody else's qualifications and figure out what your superpowers are, and then just play with those in as big a way as you possibly can, and you'll have a fabulous life. That's what I would encourage them to do.
Aaron, I'm grateful that you're in my life. I'm grateful that we had this conversation. I'm grateful to get an advance copy of your book.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see what the future holds. It's an honor to have you in my life.
It's a pleasure to be with you and to work with you. It's an honor for me. So thanks.